Welcome to the Breakup Recovery Podcasts by your host, Barbara Stevens. Discover the wisdom and remarkable insights of Barbara Stevens, breakup recovery mentor, author, and public speaker. Barbara offers programs and solutions for any breakup so you can turn your life around, create lasting changes for the better, and embrace life again.
Welcome to Breakup Recovery Podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'm Barbara Stevens, and Breakup Recovery is a podcast helping you recover from your breakup. In this week's episode, I welcome Dave Jackson. Now, Dave, you are a guru in the world of podcasting. I, for one, listened to your podcast, which is called The School of Podcasting. I came across it when I was researching on how to podcast for myself. And I have continued to listen to your podcast as it definitely gives those of us that are podcasting some great tips and ideas and a perspective from someone who has been podcasting forever. But that's not the reason I asked you to come onto my podcast. I remembered hearing a few times during the times that I was listening to your podcast that you were in fact divorced. And I think you have been through that divorce process twice. So when I hear someone use those words breakup or divorce, in your case, my ears prick up and I take special notice. I reached out to you and I asked you to come on my podcast because I admire how you tell stories. And I'm hoping in today's episode you will share stories of how you navigated the breakup process. So welcome, Dave, and thank you for agreeing to come on to Breakup Recovery Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. This should be fun, digging in the dirt a little bit, so it'll be great.
So let's start with your first marriage. Tell me briefly about your relationship, how you met, how long you were together, and if there were any challenges.
Oh, I met her I worked in a restaurant. I was a waiter and she was a cook. And so one thing led to another, and we dated for 5 years and we were married for 10. And we were pretty much right on the road to what you think you're going to do. We got married, we eventually got a house, and the next thing was to have babies. And I knew when I married her, she had one ovary. She'd had something in one of her ovaries, and she had to have it removed. But they said, hey, you have one, you'll probably still be able to have children. And then turns out she had endometriosis, which is basically speed bumps for sperm. And so we spent ourselves into bankruptcy trying to have a child because it just wasn't working, and then blew through our savings. And then when that was done, and you just love your wife and she really, really wants a baby, then you start charging fertility treatments. I do not recommend that. And so it really got to the point where even if we had actually had a baby, we were so up to our eyeballs in debt, I don't know how we would have paid for it. It was really amazing. And so finally, God bless him, this doctor looked at us and said, I've just got to say, you guys aren't going to be able to conceive. You might want to look into adoption. And as sad as it was for me to hear that, because I always wanted to have a ton of kids, it was kind of a relief because I was like, we're making really bad financial choices. And so the problem then happened is, obviously my wife was we're both devastated. And, you try to get through whatever you can. But my problem then turned into, okay, we've got major credit card debt and, we've got all these bills to pay. And I was offered a job at my job, a different position at my job. And I got the bad news was there was more travel. The good news was there was more money involved. So I talked it over with her, and I would basically be home like Thursday through Sunday. So I was gone most of the week, and we'll make it work. Yada, yada, yada. Well, that's the last thing you should do when you have a wife who needs her husband because she's going through this kind of grieving process. And I was just trying to keep the lights on. So that was strike number one against me. And then throw into the mix that she had a history in her family of alcoholism. So while I'm not away, she starts drinking. And that then became a problem to where it used to be, I'm just going out with my mom on the weekends. And then it's Tuesday night and she's hammered and can't find her shoes. That's where it got. And so that became a big, big issue because I really was afraid she was going to kill somebody. And yet I didn't want to go pick her up because that was then enabling. That was a whole bunch of stress. The final straw was she ended up cheating on me in a drunken stupor. And at that point, I had kind of, because we just argued a lot. And there just came a point where I said, okay, you know what? I believe in my wife. I know somewhere under there she's smart, and she's going to figure out that there's no answers in the bottle, and we'll just, when she's done going through this phase, we'll figure it out. And instead, she went and cheated on me, and that's when I was like, okay, there's just not much left here to resolve. So that was the end of that. And if you can have a friendly divorce, that was the problem. 9/11 hit. That was the final straw. 9/11 hit, and she got her hours cut back at work. Well, we were already just barely paying the bills. And so that's when we had to file bankruptcy, because that's the only choice we had. And so we had to figure out if we were going to keep the house or not. And so we were making all these major future decisions. And that's when she finally just broke down and said, I got to tell you something. And I'm like, what? She goes, I cheated. And so that, as you might imagine, I was not happy to hear. In a marriage at that point that was already on the brink, I was just like, let's just call it a day. We'll go our separate ways. We won't save the house. We'll keep our cars. And I actually helped her move. I mean, if you can have a friendly divorce, we pulled one off. And I guess for me, this was somebody I'd known for 15 years, and I didn't hate her. I hated what she did. And looking back at it now, 30 years later, we never tried counseling. I kind of go, I probably should have given counseling a try. But at that point, I was so fed up with her drinking and things like that. And we'd gone to marriage counseling before she told me that. And that was a matter of, the counselor just said, well, you need to quit drinking. And she said, I'm not quitting drinking. So if I somehow could have got her to quit drinking, because you cannot argue with a drunk person, then I might have given that another shot. But that was the end of that one. So I helped her move. I ended up moving in with my brother. Brother's a saint, and he just said, look, you're going to have lawyer bills and things like that. And there wasn't anything to fight over. Everything we had, we'd already, there was no house, cars, and obviously no kids. So it was a pretty easy in terms of dividing things up. It was just like, okay, who gets the grill, who gets the TV, and it wasn't by any means painless, but I hear people that just argue and fight and just can't be in the same room with each other. And that was just not the case.
Do you think somehow you had checked out of their marriage emotionally a bit before you found out that she had cheated on you?
Yeah, I had already, just because you can't argue with a drunk person, and she was just drunk all the time, that I was just like, okay, I've kind of already given her the ultimatum of, you really need to quit, or, I'm just not dealing with this anymore. And I had the way the house was set up, all my toys were in the attic. And so I would just come home and we would eat dinner and things like that. And I would just eventually I would just leave. I would just go in the attic. So I definitely had checked out at that point. And it was always, I would try to do something. And about the time I think something would go okay, she'd go out with her mom and come home hammered. And it was just this never ending spin of, I think things are getting better, and then they weren't. And especially if you have the same problem coming back to bite you, that's really hard to take, because you get your hopes up that, okay, I think we're back on the right track, and then it happens again, and it takes you right back to where you were. So any progress you've made is wiped out pretty easily.
Dave, is she still drinking?
She finally, literally, and I mean, we've been divorced probably 20 years. I mean, that was in my 20s. And I moved about an hour away, and I just moved back now to my hometown. And again, we occasionally would, text each other if something, if somebody's parents died or something like that. We'd kind of keep each other on major events. Again, I don't really have any ill will towards her. So when I moved back, she said, well, she's a waitress now. She goes, you should stop in. So I did. And she said, well, I finally quit drinking last year. And I go, really? And she goes, yeah. She goes, I just decided I was too old for that stuff. I guess she almost drove into somebody's house. That was kind of her rock bottom. And she said, I'm going to kill somebody. Because she'd already, after we got divorced, she got a DUI and had to spend, I think, 3 days in jail or something like that. So even that didn't wake her up. So finally, when she almost literally killed somebody, and as far as I know, she's still sober. So I was like, anything I can do to help you stay sober, let me know. Yeah, so she's finally now sober. So
do you think living with your brother after your divorce helped you navigate some of your emotions to get through that divorce?
Yeah, because he had been through a divorce. His wife also had cheated on him. So I had kind of somebody who understood what it was like to go through that. And shortly thereafter, I went back to school. I had quite the trifecta. I got divorced, and I'm going to say probably 5 months later, I lost my job. And in the process of looking for a job, I decided I need to go back to school and get a second degree. And he was nice enough to just say, hey, stay here until you get through school. So that was very nice. And I think that also helped me kind of take my mind off things, because now I'm working on homework and, this and that. And like I said, I think having somebody there, because I know now with my second divorce, I moved back here and it's just me and the cat. And it's a whole different ball game. And you find yourself talking to the cat a lot, knowing that the cat is not going to talk back. But I think it definitely, if you can have somebody to talk to, especially somebody who's gone through a similar situation. And you see, my brother's now been married forever to his second wife, and you kind of see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that helped as well.
So tell me about your second marriage.
My second marriage, I'll try to make this one quicker. We met online, and our first date lasted about 6 hours. We just hit it off splendidly. It was like, but the bad news is she lived an hour away. So we did kind of this long distance thing for a while. I was also at that point still going to school. And so the more serious we got, the more it was weird, because she had to come second. Like, homework comes first, then you have to kind of understand that. It's not always going to be this way. But right now, there are times when if I've got a test on Friday, I can't go out to dinner on Thursday. That's just not going to work that way. And she did not, that was a red flag. She did not play that role very well. And then at one point we'd been dating for, it wasn't very long, maybe a year or so. And she was like, look, we're not getting any younger. If you really love me, we need to get engaged. And looking back now, I just go, what was I thinking? And a lot of the stuff I did was like, well, if I do this, then she'll be okay, and I can focus back on school, because this is really distracting. And so we got engaged, and I said, we're going to get engaged. I said, but I want to have a long engagement. Like, when all this school stuff is over and we can date like normal people with I'll move to Cleveland. We can, it'll be like normal people. There's no 2-hour commute back and forth. And instead, of course, she decided later, no, I don't want to have a long engagement. I want to get married. So we got married a month after I graduated. And again, I did that. Why? Because I just wanted her to be happy. If this will make you happy. So I kind of got married to fix the relationship, which, looking back, I'm like, what was I thinking? So, and we knew 6 months into our marriage, we started going to counseling, because it was like, wait a minute, where we clicked on that first date. Well, everybody clicks on the first date. Your first 2 weeks my mom used to call it the gaga phase, where the person can do no wrong. And that's why I stayed in the relationship. I always I was like, oh, we really got along really well those first couple of weeks. Maybe we can get back to that. And we just never did. Most of my hobbies, podcasting, playing the guitar, are things I do solo. And so she had no hobbies, and she also had no friends. And so if I wanted to go podcast, she would take it as I was abandoning her. And she kind of had self-esteem issues, as does everybody. So it really got to the point where everything I did was a competition. So if I really liked a TV show, well, you like that show more than you like me. Well, you like podcasting more than you like me. You like riding your bike more than me. Well, ride your bike with me. Come on, I bought her a bike. Come with me. And we could never there's the old saying of you can be right or you can be married. I will take credit for this one. I like to be right. I'm the epitome of there's the emotional person. Logic, that's the word I was looking for. I'm a very logical thinker. But where 1 + 1 = 2, that kind of thinking. For her, 1 + 1 feels like 3, so it was 3. And I could sit here all day and go, no, 1 + 1 is 2. See, 1 and 1. And so because I thought I was right, and she sure thought she was right, even though it might have been her feelings, no one would ever compromise. And we never really had what I would call a dialogue. Like, I would try to hear her side of the story, and I feel like she never tried to hear my side of the story, or because I would always say, look, we're missing a piece of the puzzle here. You feel this way. I feel this way. There's probably something where you think I think this, or I think you think that, or you didn't know I did. There's something we're missing. Let's put together both sides of the story and see where we're having a miscommunication. And so I'm very logical. And again, I'm not saying this in a negative way. She's very purely emotional. She runs on emotions. And so you cannot explain to someone, logically, this is why you shouldn't feel bad, because I'm not a bad person and I didn't mean to hurt you. Well, if you feel bad, you feel bad. And I get that. I learned a lot from it. We went to counseling for almost 6 years, but in the end, and we were in those 6 years, we were separated twice, and we'd come to a point where we just weren't getting along at all. And she said, I think it's time for us to separate again, but this time I want to do it legally. I want to go do a legal separation. And I said, okay. I said, but I got to tell you, I said, I'm willing to work on the marriage. I said, but I'm going to be brutally honest here. I'm really tired. And I said, we both need to bring our A game because we know what to do. We've gone to counseling. We just don't do it. And she got very upset that I said that and said, well, fine. Well, then we can just get divorced. And I go, and if you want to do that, I will do that too. Again, I'm really tired. And so it was interesting because we filed for divorce. And when there's no kids and no house to fight over again, our court date came up really quick. And she came to me and said, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, you know what? We've been through all this counseling. Let's go through some of our dumbest arguments. Like I had one argument once where I was trying to lose weight. We both needed to lose weight. I bought her a Fitbit. I had a Fitbit. And we could do little competitions and cheer each other on. And she wouldn't wear the Fitbit. I guess because she thought it was stupid too. But I was like, look, it's the size of a quarter. Can't you do that for your husband? I don't want to do this. And so I said, can you see where that was like, you could have done that for me? It really wasn't asking that much. No, I didn't want to wear it. And then so we just went down the line of all of our petty little stupid arguments, trying to see if we could use our skills to come to some sort of either compromise or understand. And every single one we just struck out on, myself included. I want to include that. I mean, I didn't change. She didn't change. And I just said, this is why we shouldn't be married. I said, because we make each other miserable. So
it sounds like you had 6 years of having the same conversations.
Yeah, very much so. And we had times where things would click, but her father just recently died. And so I actually went to the funeral because, again, I knew that guy I was married for 8 years. Well, I was with her for 8 years. And she had children, so I had stepchildren for a while. And I just wanted to be there to support the family. And she originally was going to take a job and move to another state. Well, when her father died, she stayed back to kind of help and be around for her mom. Well, she didn't have any money. She ran out of a job. And she's like, hey, she called me up and said, I know this is weird, but could you help me out? I'm going to lose my phone, and I'm trying to find a new job, and I can't if my cell phone doesn't work. So I actually lent her a fair amount of money. And I know some people are like, wait, you lent your ex-wife money? And I'm like, well, yeah, she's my ex-wife. And, you know, I said, I don't think much of her as a wife, but as a person, as a mom, and as a nurse, you know, she's okay. We just didn't fit as man and wife. And my friend in this case needs help. So I was able to do that. I guess I'm lucky in that aspect that I've had somewhat friendly divorces. My brothers did not. My brother doesn't even want to see his ex-wife, and I understand why. But for me, I guess I value friendship maybe more than some people. And if I have somebody who's known me for 10 years, there aren't that many people that can say that. So, and I'm not going on vacation with any of these people, but I've always just said, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know.
So, Dave, how did you feel when the second marriage failed? It was divorce, it was finished, there was no more marriage.
Well, you feel like a failure, of course, and you kind of, for me at least, I guess because I had gone through so much counseling, we'd gone through separation, we had read books, we had gone to, retreats, and we tried everything. As much as I could look at myself in the mirror and say, look, you really did try everything. The hardest part, I think, is I just was listening to an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, because with Howard Stern, he's this radio guy in the States, and he was talking to the comedian Jerry Seinfeld about when he got married, and he said, well, it was kind of weird because all his friends were getting married, and he said he always felt like this weird kind of fifth wheel kind of guy, and it's like everybody thinks you should be married, and that's the thing that I kind of struggle with at this point, because all my friends have grandkids. Well, I don't have any kids, and they all are married. So I really feel like I'm on the outside looking in. And so that at times is hard to deal with. But on the other hand, I've also had friends of mine that say, man, you don't know what you have. And I'm like, what? You can do anything you want. You want to get up and leave? You just, feed the cat and go. And I'm like, well, that's true. I didn't think about that. But it is odd, especially now it's just me and my cat, and which in itself is I never want to be a stereotype. So the fact that I'm a guy living alone in an apartment with his cat, I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. I do not want to be that guy. But on the other hand, I don't, where I used to just dread coming home because it was just going to be another argument, I'm now much peaceful. And it was one of those things where, like, one day in my apartment, I was doing something and I was like, this feels weird. I like, what's different here? And it just dawned on me that I was happy. Like, I hadn't been like at peace. I wasn't under stress. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember this now. It's happiness. It's been a while since I've had it. That is something that I just now, I'm, it's the glass half full or half empty.
So it sounds like for you to get through your divorce process and navigate your emotions, you're focusing on the positives rather than thinking about the negatives.
Yeah, and my sister-in-law is a hopeless romantic, and so she's always trying to connect me with people. And so finally this one girl, I called her up. We just had nothing in common. And so that didn't work. And that's the other thing. I took this time to sit back and look at and say, okay, you've been married twice. Are there any similarities in these women that attracted you to them? Because this didn't work out very well. And I did. My background's in teaching. And I truly believe I'm attracted to people who need help. And in both cases, both of my ex-wives had not great childhoods. So they were kind of the damsel in distress kind of thing. And I had a neighbor of mine stop one day. I never met her. And I worked from home, so I was the only person around she could ask. And she said, my car won't start. Is there any way you could jumpstart my car? And to make a long story short, I was driving a Toyota Prius. The whole car is electric, but I couldn't find the battery. So I just drove her to work because she wasn't that far away. And she was absolutely blown away that I would do that for her. And she was just so thankful. She's like, I was going to lose my job if I didn't get to work today. When she got out of the car and I drove home, I was literally high. Like I just felt so great because I'd really, really helped somebody. And that's when I went, whoa, hold on a second. This is something you need to know about yourself, that you like to, that's what I like to do, is help people. But that can be a negative because you can get pulled into situations that, you can get pulled in or attracted to people who maybe A, don't want help, and B, can't change. So I now recognize that now if I start getting attracted to somebody, not that I need a perfect person by any means, but I now know that maybe in some cases that is attracting me to some people, and I need to go in with my eyes wide open, I guess, at this point.
You don't seem the sort of person who has any difficulty in talking about their feelings. Do you think that's something that men find quite difficult to talk about, their feelings?
I think so. And I think part of that is probably, again, all the counseling I've gone through. That has a lot to do with that. But even with my best friend that I've known since I was like 10, we occasionally will talk about our feelings, but mostly we're talking about music and sports and our jobs and things like that. So on occasion, we will get into a serious conversation. I don't know that I had one conversation with my dad once when I got divorced the first time. And he kind of gave me a little pep talk and, there's more fish in the sea kind of thing. But other than that, we didn't really have any major kind of, that kind of talk. So I don't think we get a lot of practice with it. And we're probably, because of our pride, afraid to look stupid. We don't want to make ourselves, we don't want to admit that we have a problem. Maybe that could be part of it. But it's something that you should, find somebody to talk to. Even if it's a journal, sometimes just writing your feelings is a way to start at least getting them out of it's a release in a way. It's not the same as talking to a human, but journaling I've found at times can be helpful just to kind of get it out of your head. It's like, okay, I've said it, I've done it, I've thought it. Now I'm going to move on.
So your brother helped you on your first breakup or your first divorce. Did he help you through your second divorce?
Well, the second divorce was fun because my ex-wife had said some things that basically my brother and his sister, well, more my sister-in-law, but my brother and large chunks of my family said, we don't want you to bring her around. She was not liked at all by my family, which added, I think, another thing to another reason to divorce. So it was kind of odd because when we first got divorced, I thought, does this mean I'm back in the family? And I wasn't. They were still kind of sad that because I said, look, I got to side with my wife. I'm trying to save my marriage here. And so it took a little while. But yeah, at this point, that's actually one of the best things in my life right now is my brother and I. My father had passed away. It was the first time I'd seen my brother in years. We didn't talk to each other. And it wasn't that we hated each other. I think we were both respecting our wives. I think my sister-in-law was, I think, more hurt because she saw how it hurt my brother that I sided with my wife. My wife didn't want me to go to because I said, well, can I go to Christmas without you? And she was like, no. And so it was just a really odd situation. So when my father passed away and I finally got in a room with my brother, and it's just, you just have a connection with some people. And it was kind of like, okay, this is stupid. The reason we were apart is no longer a reason to be apart. And so, so we are very much back on track. So, and it's one of those things that's odd that we haven't really talked much about that marriage, and we haven't talked about how the fact that it caused a rift with us. It's just one of those things where it happened, and now we're back to where we were, and we're just going to kind of ignore the fact that we didn't talk to each other for years. And we're just happy that we are back on good terms, I think, at this point.
And sometimes, people say you shouldn't ignore those sort of things, but sometimes, what can you do about the past? You can't do anything. You've got your brother back, you've got a relationship with your family back, so really, what do you have to talk about?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things for me, I had a dog when I lived with my brother, and I had that dog for 14 years, and it literally was my peanut butter and jelly to my jam. The dog went everywhere with me. When the dog died, I put it on Facebook, and my brother had not sent me a birthday card. I had no communication with my brother. I would send him birthday cards and Christmas cards, but never got anything back. And so when I put that up, he just put one sentence, "I'm really sorry to hear about your dog." And that was enough for me to know, okay, my brother still cares about me. This is a stupid thing that was going on, but underneath it all, when I really need him, he was there for me. So that was a big just sign to me that, okay, we're still brothers. We're just dealing with family stupid stuff at this point.
So have you got any other tips that you'd like to give any of the male listeners of Breakup Recovery podcast to help them navigate the breakup process so that they can start to feel better again?
The other thing I would say that I learned, at least, is don't overlook counseling. Sometimes you go through marriage counseling, afterwards, if you just need somebody to talk to, I think for so many years, psychiatrists and therapists were called, you got to go to the shrink because I'm crazy. And that's just not the case. Sometimes we just need somebody to think it out. And also take that time to reflect. I think that's really what I did for the first year. I really sat back and tried to objectively look at, okay, here's what I did wrong. Here's what I could have did better. And here's what I'm going to try to do in the future to really kind of understand me and what makes me tick. Like you said, the past is the past. So I can't go back and change things that I did. I can only learn from my mistakes. I do my best not to. I feel I have tried to wring out every bit of knowledge that I could from my mistakes. And I think I'm done with that at this point. And if I keep looking at my mistakes, I'm missing all the future if you constantly look backwards. So you can't change your mistakes, but you can definitely change your future. And you're not if you're constantly looking backwards.
So, Dave, do you think there's another marriage in you?
You know what? It's going to be interesting. You never say never. It's going to be somebody because both my ex-wives were screamers. And obviously, there are always going to be arguments where you raise your voice. I'm not talking, that's nonsense. But I do want somebody that I can actually have a dialogue with. Like, once everything blows up, can we sit back and actually have a conversation so I can understand your side, my side, and put it together and figure out what the truth is. If I can get that with somebody, yeah, I would do it maybe. At this point, it's just a matter of working. It's nothing I'm in a hurry to do at this point. I'll put it that way. So,
Dave, if people want to find out more about what you do and listen to some of your podcasts or even just connect with you, where can they find this information?
If you just want to go to one website, I have a website, powerofpodcasting.com, that has a list of all the shows that I do. So I've got shows there about weight loss and podcasting, and my cat has a podcast. So if you want to meet Bernie, Bernie has a podcast. And so everything is over at powerofpodcasting.com.
I'll put that in the summary. Dave, thank you for coming on Breakup Recovery podcast and being honest and sharing your stories and giving us some ideas and some tips and some strategies that people can put in place, and a way to look at the past and not to dwell on maybe some of the mistakes that they've made, and to have a positive outlook on the future. So thank you once again for coming on Breakup Recovery podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was great.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode number 107, How to Survive 2 Divorces and Still Have a Positive Outlook on Life with Dave Jackson. This episode went on a bit longer than my normal 15 to 20 minutes, and in the past I've split a long interview into 2 parts. However, this time I decided to keep the interview with Dave Jackson in one episode. I love the way Dave was honest about his failed relationships, about the faults on both sides, and I love the positive outlook Dave has for his future, how Dave is comfortable living the single life, and with his cat, of course. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Dave Jackson is highly regarded in the podcasting field, and you can check out all of his podcasts at thepowerofpodcasting.com. I hope you took something away from this episode, and if you think the information shared in this podcast could help someone you know, I hope you will tell them about Breakup Recovery Podcast and share it with them so they too can get some ideas, strategies and tips to help them through their own breakup. They can download it at Apple Podcast, Stitcher, iHeartRadio and my website, barbarastevens.com.au. I would appreciate it if you could leave a review in Apple Podcast. I love to read the reviews. It keeps me inspired to continue and also shows me that people are listening and getting value from the content delivered in each episode. And the last thing I'd like to say is, be gentle on yourself. You deserve happiness.
If you would like to hear previous Breakup Recovery podcasts, visit barbarastevens.com.au. Connect with Barbara Stevens on social media with Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor on Facebook and at You'll Be Okay on Twitter. Read further blogs, view webinar replays, and download your free ebook, 3 Easy Steps to Surviving Your Breakup, and much more at barbarastevens.com.au.